Hey everyone, this is Tiger's Eye. Today I want to make a video just explaining about how I go about making beats in Ableton Live. This is going to be a good tutorial for those that are just starting out, or those of you that might be looking for some advanced mixing tips and maybe some music theory advice as well. So today I'm going to be explaining how I made this beat here. So to get started on this, I did make this in B minor. So this is pretty easy to do in Ableton. All you gotta do is go over to your track or MIDI panel, show your scale, and you can select everything from here. And for example, I've done it in B minor. If you have the Ableton Push, which is what I have here, does make workflow a lot quicker and easier to make what you want. So for the start, my melody here goes off of this. And I made this using Contact. I used Playbox from Native Instruments, a really cool piece of equipment or a piece of software that they made here. You can set everything to your key and go from there. By itself, this was a little bit different, so I'll play it on its own. So I really like this melody, but it had some low end and some bass in it, which I wanted to do a different route for the bass line. In order to resolve this, what I did is add an auto filter here. This removes any of the low end below 100, thus keeping most of the mid and high range. After that, to give it a little more grit and punch, we added a New York style compressor. This is from Baby Audio. This blends the dry signal of the track with the compressed version. We're riding that compressor pretty hard here. And then to give it a little bit of trippiness and saturation, we added thermal. This gives it a little bit of a chorus effect, a little more analog style warmth, and just gives it a little more width. So by itself, sounds like this. And with it all, it sounds like this. Next thing we added were the chords here. So there's not too much crazy going on here, but a little music theory lesson. So we did a 1, 3, 5, 7 style chord progression. What that means is I took the root note being the 1, and then we went to the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th of the chord of the usable notes within the scale. So thus we go 1, skip 2, 3, skip 4, 5, skip 6, then 7. And then we repeated this throughout, making different chords along the way. This gave us this sound here. And here I'm using Cloud Supply, again from Native Instruments. This is a pretty cool synth that they've made. It's primarily made along the lines of like hip hop, lo-fi, anything along that lines. Super unique and really fun to use. Later on down the chain, I did add an auto pan. This I've set to a 0 phase, which thus makes a choppy effect that we'll see here. So throughout the track, you'll hear subtle differences in this pad here, which gives it some unique characters, keeping the listener's ear interested, even though the instrument and chords are not changing. Next up on our bass, we have two different things going on. So we have Serum here for a respace. This creates a sub bass frequency for low end punch. Really good if you have a sub or if you really just want to add a lot of low end to your mix. It's pretty simple to make. You just have a basic sawtooth style wave here. It's actually the default one that'll open up when you have this VST. And then you apply a low pass filter over here. We supply that cutoff to get rid of any high end. We want to save that for our chords, instruments, and other things. Resonance gives your sub frequencies a little more punch. And then drive just gives it a little more meat. To add a little bit more consistency to it all, we have a built-in compressor. which makes sure that we have constant character sonic sounds throughout this, and then a little more distortion to help give it some grit. By itself, sounds like this. Then we have another bass here. This is to give a little more sonic characters. This is made with Substance to give it a more analog or more actual played bass sound. So that gives it more of that'll give it more of a realistic feel. In this, so we don't have it being boring or repetitive, we have velocity. What this does for you is if you didn't use this, it would sound kind of repetitive, machine gun like, and very unrealistic if played. So what velocity does is it changes and randomizes each of the notes played here in this MIDI clip, giving it a more realistic feel. You can, if you want, go in and adjust your velocities yourself, but I personally don't like to do that. I think it's a lot of work, and that can make workflow a lot simpler. Next up, for a little bit of ambience and uniqueness to this all, we have another VST that we're using with Contact. We're using Rev by Output. This takes, as it sounds, reversed played samples and adds a little bit more to it. So what I have here going on is this. So, and to, again here, just to make sure we have room for our low end, we cut off that the sub frequencies below 100. Here, for a little bit of mixing, we have Spiff, giving it a little more meat to this whole thing. And then we have just some reverb on it, help filling some of that empty space. On our drum track that we created, we have not much going on here, but we have Spiff, which what this does in context is give a lot more meat to my drums. So by itself, the drums sounded like this before adding this. And then with it, so that's going to help your snare pop, your kick punch, your hi-hat sparkle a little bit, and it helps control the transients. It's a little bit different from an EQ without really changing those frequencies. Last thing on this track that we have is some background vox just for some ambience and some effect. Here we removed low end as well, just to make sure we have room for the bass. And then cool thing to add some glitchiness or a little bit of uniqueness is this auto pan and reverb. So with the auto pan set to 0, this adds a choppy like effect, and then reverb helps to add a little more ambience and space. By itself, and then with it, sounds like this. So that is basically the entire track. Some mixing things that we've done here to help everything pop is we've taken a good bit of compression down on our bass tracks here. So the multi-band compressor helps to tie in that low end. It also, what we have going on is the mid-range is squashed pretty hard, and then a glue compressor ties them together. So by themselves, they would sound like this. So it sounds kind of loose, kind of flabby. It's a little bit over the place. Once we apply the multi-band compressor and glue compressor, helps give a little more meat and grit to the whole thing, but ties them together in the end. Next thing we have here, this compressor really isn't doing too much, but it's a key mixing point, especially in this style of music. What we have is that it's sidechained to my drum track. The heaviest things on my drum track are the kick and the snare in this loop. So what this does is anytime the kick and snare hit, this allows them to breathe perfectly. So we'll hear that together with these two. So you can hear right away the kick and snare just punch through everything through that low end, especially with how strong the bass can really be. So then, and as a context with all of it together, we have this going on. So last thing that we did here, and this just adds some ear candy, and it's a pretty simple thing you can do. This is what's known as the underwater, the space effect. There's a lot of different terms for it, but what you're going to do here is you're going to create two buses, which I've done here is under this group track for all my instruments, and the drums are going to be by themselves. So what we've done here is we've added an auto filter here. One's going to work as a low pass, and one on all your instruments and bass is going to be a high pass filter. What this then does is going to separate the two sonically, so that way you have this underwater space effect. So we'll hear a before and after it's applied here. So it kind of gives that low fidelity feel to it. You can barely hear too much of the drums. You hear a muffled version of your melody and chords. And then we automate these to slowly breathe a little bit more as we go through this mix. And then at the tail end here, we're going to bring everything back in. Alrighty, and that's pretty much the whole track there. So that is just a basic way to kind of build a track and beat in Ableton Live, and some basic mixing tips. If any of you have questions or just want to reach out with more ideas, feel free. You can hit me up on Instagram, YouTube, or any social media. Thanks for watching, and hope you all are doing well.